Let's continue our scene-by-scene review of HBO's Rome. We're at Season 1, Episode 4. The name of the episode is Stealing from Saturn, and we have gotten 35 minutes into the episode, where Quintus, Pompey's bastard, attacks the house of Arenas, and Pulo saves the day by arriving with Caesar's gold and beating the crap out of the Pompeians. So now that Varinus has realized what happened to the gold from the treasury, he instantly tells Pulo that he needs to get it back to Caesar, since because of his bragging, it's very probable that everyone will know whatever happened to the gold and where it ended up. Pulo, of course, in absolute fashion with the character, proposes that the two of them just grab the gold and run for Spain to live out their lives. In this case, I have to say I need to agree with Varinus, even with his annoying morals. In this case, he does have a point. Realistically speaking, no matter where they run, the gold will be traceable. And it's not like Spain is that far off for Caesar to find them. It's actually a fucking province where he was on campaign anyway. So, what's to stop him finding them there? And given they've stolen the entire Roman treasury, he is sure to go after them if he realizes it. So Pulo relents and goes to Caesar to surrender the gold and Pompey's bastard, and we now await to see if Caesar will kill Pulo for what he did. In the next scene, we are back at Attia's party in honor of Caesar's return. Caesar passes by Servilia and gives her one of those looks, the horn dog alert, and she smiles pleasantly, knowing now for sure that he still wants her. And oh god, this hits me so hard. I was the same pathetic piece of shit a few years ago, just vying for the attention of my interest and gleaming with happiness at the slightest pathetic sign of them wanting me back. Same as a hungry dog they throw crumbs at. And that's how you know you're a total nerd, completely identifying with the emotional state of some rich bitch from ancient Rome. Yeah, Atia, of course, notices this little gesture and looks at them like a harpy, because her general idea of the purpose of this party was for her to be able to seduce her uncle, which, what can I say, just nice. Pulo then arrives at Atia's house to let Caesar know about the gold, and Caesar does not seem to be angry at Pulo. He's actually pretty happy that now he knows where the gold is, and surprisingly, thanks the gods or something, which looks a bit weird coming from him because I've always perceived him as something of an atheist. It's kind of a typical trait of a megalomaniacal people that they either do not believe in gods or believe in them, but just don't give a fuck about pleasing them. So maybe Caesar was leaning more towards the second category, the historical one, I mean. And then Caesar decides to send Quintus back to Pompey with an offer for a truce, which I must say really is genius in terms of propaganda. He says, I'm sending you back to him with an offer of peace, and if Pompey continues the violence, then the war will ultimately be blamed on him. On the other hand, Caesar ultimately dies because of his abundant pardons to his biggest enemies, so one wonders if he was genius or kind of overly confident and actually stupid. Like, Quintus literally says to Caesar that he will see him on a spike in the forum. If it was me, I would never ever leave that son of a bitch get away alive. At some point, you just forget about propaganda and stuff and fucking kill them. But what do I know? And by the way, I have to mention that I really love how Caesar shuts up Mark Antony when he insists that they kill Quintus. Antony is raving at him, asking him if he's mad or something, and Caesar just tells him twice in the most calm manner possible, be quiet. I have now mentioned several times in my other videos how Kieran Heinz's Caesar does not look imposing to me. And so in this moment, he did. So I might have exaggerated my dislike of the depiction of Caesar a bit. I guess it depends on the particular scene he's in. We are now back inside the house where a bitch fight is taking place, and I just live for those. Atia obviously is jealous of Servilia because Caesar is in love with her, and so of course Atia will try and use passive aggression in order to get her revenge. She goes over to Servilia and tells her that she noticed how much she and Caesar were into each other and asks Servilia to admit it, which of course Servilia denies out of decency, I guess. But then Atia goes on to not leave the matter alone and even tries to assert dominance by physically touching Servilia, which makes us viewers feel really awkward. And we feel awkward at the inappropriate touching because we know it's a method of attacking the person, albeit in a subtle manner. And we feel somewhat bad for Servilia, or at least I do. And then Natia becomes even more of a bitch and asks Calpurnia whether she thinks Servilia is beautiful, which is the ultimate bitch move, given that everyone knows what's happening here. But then Calpurnia turns out to be a badass and shuts Atia up by basically telling her, "You're trying to make passive aggressive small talk, leave me out of this." And she completely has a point. I mean, I do love Atia's character for being such an asshole, but with characters like that, you also love it when they come across people who can shut them up. And this scene is perfect in this regard. And then Caesar indeed does not punish Pulo for stealing the gold initially. Instead, he gives him a reward of 100 pieces of gold because, in his words, "I do not like to argue with fortune, and clearly she has taken you for a pet," which I think is a brilliant line. It goes to show that that type of person who goes with the flow whenever something happens to them and takes into consideration the good parts while being able to disregard the negative elements, it's a type of personality that I'm trying to aspire to. And this reminds me of a few minutes ago when Caesar thanked some deity. Well, there you go. Apparently, it was Fortuna, the goddess of luck and fate. And I have to say, given that Caesar was basically the precursor of all historic gambles because of his "the die is cast" line while crossing the Rubicon, it only makes sense that he will be believing at least in this one god. And then Caesar starts talking, to Octavian, who was watching the entire time, which is a short scene, but the show uses those to explain to us how and why Caesar randomly comes to name Octavian as his heir. The genius future Emperor Augustus has realized that ultimately Caesar is right to offer Pompey the truce because even if Pompey refuses, the Senate and Cicero will accept it, and Pompey will be isolated. Again, really short scene, but very significant in terms of historical context. And I love the fact that the filmmakers employ this kind of subtle historical hints. It shows that they're treating their audience as people who know the historical context of all this and are not just some stupid fucks who are watching television randomly. And then all of a sudden, Caesar gets one of his epileptic seizures and they hide him away while it passes. And I must say, the actor really portrays the seizure well. I do remember being creeped out by the scene, even the first time that I saw it. And then, of course, the slave hears Caesar panting from behind the door and thinks that he's having sex with Octavian, which we know will make for a hilarious and iconic scene with Atia later on. Ever since I watched this show, I remember this one iconic line of hers from the first time I heard it with the exact intonation. I will not say it's decent, but who's to say what's decent in times like these? I love it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll review this scene when it comes. And then Caesar and Calpurnia leave the party, and he goes on to do some good old cheating on the wife and makes up a good lie about it. He says to her they need to urgently discuss some matters as soon as possible since Pompey will refuse the truce and war will be imminent. I have to say, a perfect liar is always the one that employs some level of truth in his lie so that he can cover it better. uh, but before he goes off to have sex with Servilia, we see a somewhat touching scene between Octavian and Atia. Maybe for the first time ever in the show, she exhibits some genuine emotion and a vulnerability. And she gives her son a big hug, which is sweet. But then when you think about why she is crying, she is sad because she didn't manage to seduce her uncle. And she says to Octavian that she's all alone, which I guess is true, but does she mean like alone in a romantic sense, or in a sense that she's alone without having anyone politically powerful to manipulate? Just Atia, our lovable enigma. And then in the next scene, in Pompey's camp, it turns out that Caesar was right. Pompey and Cato see through his agenda with the truce, and Cicero and Brutus want to accept it. It does confirm Caesar's genius and Octavian's. And if I had to be honest, I myself am not sure whether I would have taken the truce or not. Would you be too proud to admit being less powerful in return for life? Or would you remain proud and risk everything in the name of not admitting the defeat? I mean, how can you not love human history? And Roman history especially. It all actually happened in real life, and no movie maker or novelist could probably come up with this stuff on their own. It's just that good. In the next short scene, Pullo comes over to Varenus' house, and oops, he catches Niobe and Evander speaking intimately, which will develop their personal drama later on. I have to say, the actor who plays Evander was picked so perfectly. Like, look at his face. It's like he's about to cry and die of fear and shame. It's literally a memeable face of guilt. And then, we get to the final scene of episode 4, where Caesar goes to the temple of Jupiter with the augurs to quote unquote check whether the gods will bless his political endeavors. And of course, his bribe to the chief augur pays off. We see a wonderful scene, which is an example of how religion and politics work together back then in ancient Rome, and even today. You pay the fucking priests, and they will make the gods say whatever the fuck you want them to say. In this case, the symbol of agreement is, I guess, seeing some pigeons fly by the window. And I just love how they're even showing that beneath the window outside of the temple, there's a whole fucking pigeon pen that they keep, already with loads of pigeons to fly for whoever pays them to fly. It's a brilliant scene, and also, I have to say, a really depressing one. And with this, I can't believe I'm saying it. We actually have finished reviewing episode 4, Stealing from Saturn. Next time, we will start our scene by scene review of season 1, episode 5, which is called The Ram Has Touched the Wall, which I guess I'll have to figure out whatever that means. Anyway, thanks for watching, whoever you are, you amazing ancient Rome nerd. Big hugs from me, and I'll be back in the next part of the review.